The champagne glass trembled in Anne Washington Park's hand as her ex-husband's voice cut through the elegant chatter of Orlando's most exclusive charity gala. "Look what crawled out from under a rock," Trevor Sullivan sneered, his words dripping with the same venom that had poisoned their marriage for 3 years. "Still pretending you belong with decent people, Anne." The doctor, Phillips Center for the Performing Arts, had never felt smaller. Around them, Orlando's elite continued their conversations, but Anne could feel eyes beginning to turn their way. Trevor's new fiancée, Madison Prescott, stood beside him with a satisfied smirk, her diamond engagement ring catching the crystal chandelier light like a weapon. "I see you're still delusional enough to think you can play dress-up and fool people," Trevor continued, his voice rising just enough to draw more attention. "But we both know what you really are, don't we? Worthless trash who will never amount to anything without a man to support her pathetic existence." Anne's chest tightened, the familiar weight of his psychological warfare pressing down on her like a suffocating blanket. For a moment, she was back in their Windermere mansion, listening to him tear apart her self-worth piece by piece. But then she remembered the wedding ring on her finger, a ring Trevor hadn't noticed yet, a ring that connected her to a man whose power Trevor couldn't even begin to comprehend. "Trevor," she said quietly, her voice steadier than she felt. "You have no idea what you're talking about. Don't I?" He stepped closer, his cologne overwhelming and familiar in the worst way. "You're the same broken little girl I divorced. The same... Is there a problem here?" The voice was calm, controlled, and carried an undertone that made several nearby conversations pause. Anne turned to see her husband approaching, his perfectly tailored charcoal suit making him look like he'd stepped out of a magazine. Jin Wu Park moved with the quiet confidence of a man who had never needed to raise his voice to command respect, his dark eyes taking in the scene with calculating precision. Trevor's face shifted from confusion to irritation. "And you are." Jin Wu's smile was polite, professional, and somehow more terrifying than any scowl could have been. "Anne's husband." The words hit the gathering like a thunderclap. Conversations stopped entirely now, and Anne watched Trevor's face cycle through disbelief, rage, and something that might have been fear, though he didn't yet understand why he should be afraid. "Husband," Trevor's voice cracked slightly. "That's impossible. She can't, she wouldn't." "6 months ago," Jin Wu said smoothly, placing a protective hand on Anne's lower back. The gesture was subtle, but Anne felt the strength in his touch, the promise of safety she'd learned to trust completely. At Bok Tower Gardens' beautiful ceremony, Madison's eyes widened, her perfectly applied makeup unable to hide her shock. "Trevor, you said she was worthless trash." "Yes, I heard." Jin Wu's tone remained conversational, but something in his posture shifted almost imperceptibly. To most observers, he still looked like a successful businessman making polite conversation. Anne, however, had learned to read the subtle signs of her husband's true nature, the way his shoulders squared just slightly, the almost invisible tightening around his eyes, the way his left hand moved to adjust his cufflink, a gesture she'd noticed he made when calculating responses to problems. "Mr. Trevor demanded, clearly struggling to regain control of the situation. "Park. Jin Wu Park of Park Construction." The introduction was smooth, professional. No one in the gathering would suspect they were looking at the invisible puppet master who controlled more of Orlando's underground than the FBI could even imagine. "And you must be the ex-husband Anne mentioned. Trevor Sullivan, correct?" The way Jin Wu said Trevor's name made it clear he knew exactly who he was dealing with. Anne suppressed a shiver, remembering the night 3 weeks ago when Jin Wu had casually mentioned that he'd had Trevor investigated as a matter of course. Standard procedure for protecting his family, he'd explained, though he'd been vague about the methods used. "This is ridiculous," Trevor sputtered, his face reddening. "Anne, what kind of game are you playing? You can't just what?" Anne found her voice, strengthened by Jin Wu's presence beside her. "Move on? Build a life? Find someone who actually values me?" "Values you." Trevor's laugh was harsh and bitter. "Sweetheart, no one values damaged goods. Whatever you told this man about yourself, whatever lies you fed him, I'd be very careful about your next words." Jin Wu's voice hadn't changed in volume or tone, but something in it made Trevor step back instinctively. Around them, the crowd had grown larger, drawn by the drama unfolding at Orlando's social event of the season. Mrs. Catherine Beaumont, the Foundation's president, appeared at Anne's elbow with the practiced grace of someone accustomed to managing social disasters. "Perhaps we should move this conversation somewhere more private." "No need," Jin Wu said, his smile never wavering. "Mr. Sullivan was just leaving." "Like hell I was." Trevor's voice rose, drawing disapproving looks from the surrounding elite. "I want to know what kind of con you're running, Anne. What did you tell him? That you're some kind of successful businesswoman? That you're not the pathetic, clingy Mr. Sullivan?" Jin Wu stepped forward, and Anne noticed how several men in dark suits had quietly positioned themselves around the perimeter of their group. Security, she assumed, though she'd never seen them before. "I think you've said enough." "I'll say whatever I damn well please about my ex-wife," Trevor snapped, apparently oblivious to the way the temperature in the room seemed to have dropped. "She's a lying, manipulative—" "Trevor, stop!" Madison grabbed his arm, her socialite instincts finally kicking in. "You're making a scene." But Trevor was beyond caring about social niceties. Years of believing he could say anything to Anne without consequences had made him reckless. "You want to know what you really married?" he asked Jin Wu, his voice dripping with malice. "Hey, broken woman who couldn't even keep her own husband happy. A failure who—" Jin Wu moved so quickly that Anne almost missed it. One moment he was standing beside her, the next he was directly in front of Trevor, close enough that only Trevor could hear what he whispered. Anne watched her ex-husband's face drain of color, watched his eyes widen with something that looked like genuine terror. When Jin Wu stepped back, his expression was as pleasant as ever. "I think we understand each other now." Trevor's mouth opened and closed soundlessly. Whatever Jin Wu had said had clearly shaken him to his core. "Now then," Jin Wu continued, turning back to the crowd with a charming smile. "I believe there was mention of an auction tonight. Anne has been looking forward to bidding on the art therapy program." The crowd began to disperse, sensing the drama had ended, but Anne caught the way several people were already pulling out their phones. By morning, news of her marriage would be all over Orlando's social media. The thought should have terrified her, but with Jin Wu's hand steady on her back, she felt only relief. Trevor stood frozen for another moment, then grabbed Madison's arm. "We're leaving." "But the dinner hasn't even—" "Now, Madison. We're leaving now." As they hurried toward the exit, Anne heard Trevor's voice, shaky and urgent. "We need to go home. I need to make some calls." Anne looked up at her husband, studying his calm expression. "What did you say to him?" Jin Wu's smile was soft, loving, the expression he reserved only for her and Lily. "I simply introduced myself properly." The drive home to their Thornton Park house was quiet, the Orlando skyline glittering through the windows of Jin Wu's Mercedes. Anne watched the familiar streets pass by, her mind still processing the evening's events. She'd known this moment would come eventually, the collision of her old life with her new one, but she hadn't expected it to feel so final. "You're thinking too loudly," Jin Wu said softly, his eyes never leaving the road. Even his driving was controlled, precise. Anne had learned that everything about her husband was deliberate, calculated. It should have frightened her, but instead it made her feel safer than she'd ever felt in her life. "I'm thinking about Lily," she admitted, "about what happens when Trevor realizes he can't intimidate me anymore. He'll go after her." Jin Wu's hands tightened almost imperceptibly on the steering wheel. "He won't. You don't know him like I do. When Trevor feels cornered, when his ego is threatened, he lashes out. And Lily," Tiasan's voice caught, "she's the only weapon he has left against me." They pulled into their driveway, the motion sensors flooding the front yard with warm light. Through the living room window, Anne could see Carmen Morales, their babysitter, reading on the couch. Everything looked normal, peaceful, but Anne had learned that peace was fragile, especially when Trevor was involved. Inside, they found Lily curled up on the couch beside Carmen, fast asleep with a book about dragons still clutched in her small hands. Anne's heart clenched at the sight of her daughter's peaceful face. dark curls spread across the cushion. "She fell asleep about an hour ago," Carmen whispered, gathering her things. "Refused to go to bed until you got home. Said she wanted to hear about the fancy party." After Carmen left, Jin Wu carefully lifted Lily, and Anne watched her daughter instinctively curl into his embrace. The sight never failed to amaze her, how naturally they'd bonded, how Jin Wu had stepped into the role of father without hesitation. Lily had been wary at first, protective of the small family unit she and Anne had built together, but Jin Wu's quiet patience had won her over completely. "Mama," Lily mumbled sleepily as Jin Wu carried her upstairs. "I'm here, baby," Anne whispered, following them to Lily's room. "Did you wear the pretty dress?" "I did, and everyone said how beautiful it was." "Good." Lily's eyes drifted closed again as Jin Wu tucked her into bed. "Jin Wu, did you tell everyone Mama's the best designer in Orlando?" "I told them she's the best designer in the world," he replied seriously, and Anne felt her heart flutter the way it always did when she witnessed these moments between them. "That's right," Lily agreed with 6-year-old certainty, then fell back into deep sleep. In their own bedroom, Anne sat at her vanity, removing the diamond earrings Jin Wu had given her for their wedding. In the mirror she could see him behind her, loosening his tie with the same precise movements he brought to everything. "I need to tell you something," she said quietly. Jin Wu's hands stilled. "About tonight. About Trevor. About what he's capable of when he feels threatened." Anne turned to face him, needing to see his expression. "The custody arrangement we have, it's not legally binding. When we divorced, I was so desperate to get away from him that I agreed to an informal arrangement. He gets Lily every other weekend, but there's nothing stopping him from filing for full custody if he wants to hurt me." Jin Wu sat on the edge of the bed, his attention completely focused on her. What would he need to prove to get custody? That I'm an unfit mother, that I can't provide a stable home environment, that I'm... Anne's voice broke slightly. That I'm exactly what he said tonight, worthless trash who can't take care of her own child. "Anne," Jin Wu's voice was firm but gentle. "Look at me." She met his eyes, seeing the same steady strength that had drawn her to him 8 months ago. "You are not what he says you are, you never were." Jin Wu stood and moved to kneel in front of her chair, taking her hands in his. "You built a successful business from nothing. You raised a brilliant, kind daughter on your own. You survived 3 years of psychological warfare and came out stronger. Trevor Sullivan is a small, cruel man who needs to tear others down to feel powerful, but his power is an illusion." "Is it?" Anne asked. "He has money, connections, influence. He knows judges, politicians. If he decides to come after Lily, then he'll discover that there are different kinds of power in this world." Something flickered in Jin Wu's expression, gone so quickly Anne almost missed it, and that his influence is nothing compared to what real power looks like. Anne studied her husband's face, seeing the calm confidence that never seemed to waver. She'd always wondered about the source of that confidence, about the way people seemed to defer to him even in casual business meetings. Jin Wu commanded respect in a way that went beyond mere success. "What aren't you telling me?" she asked softly. Jin Wu was quiet for a long moment, and Anne could see him weighing his words carefully. "There are aspects of my business that I've kept separate from our life together. Not because I don't trust you, but because I wanted to protect you and Lily from complications." "What kind of complications?" "The kind that mean Trevor Sullivan's threats are meaningless." Jin Wu's voice was steady, matter-of-fact. "The kind that mean no judge in Central Florida would dare rule against you if they knew whose wife you are." Anne felt a chill run down her spine. "Jin Wu, what exactly do you do?" "I build things," he said simply. "I solve problems. I make sure the people I care about are safe." He squeezed her hands gently. "And I promise you, Anne, Trevor will never take Lily from you. Not through the courts, not through intimidation, not through any means he can imagine." The certainty in his voice was absolute, unshakable. Anne realized she was looking at a man who had never made a promise he couldn't keep. "How can you be so sure?" Jin Wu's smile was soft, loving, but underneath it Anne caught a glimpse of something harder, more dangerous. "Because Trevor Sullivan has no idea what he's really dealing with. And by the time he figures it out, it will be far too late." The first sign that Trevor was escalating came 3 days later, delivered by a process server to Anne's design studio in the trendy Milk District. Anne stared at the legal documents with growing horror, her hands trembling as she read the formal petition for emergency custody of Lily Rose Washington. Emergency custody, her assistant, Jasmine Brooks, read over her shoulder. On what grounds? Anne's voice was hollow as she read aloud. Unstable living environment, due to mother's association with individuals of questionable character and possible criminal connections. She looked up at Jasmine with wide eyes. He's claiming that Jin Wu is dangerous, that I'm putting Lily at risk by being married to him. That's insane. Jin Wu's one of the most respected businessmen in Orlando. Trevor doesn't care about truth. He cares about winning. Anne sank into her desk chair, the legal papers scattered in front of her. Look at this. He's requesting an immediate hearing. He wants temporary custody pending a full investigation into my fitness as a mother. Her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Told you that you'd never amount to anything without a man. Now let's see how much your new husband really cares about damaged goods. Tian's hands shook as she forwarded the message to Jin Wu, then called his office. His secretary, Mrs. Kim, answered with her usual professional warmth. Mrs. Park, how lovely to hear from you. I'm afraid Mr. Park is in meetings all afternoon, but I can... It's an emergency, Anne interrupted. Please, I need to speak with him now. Within minutes, Jin Wu's voice came through the phone, calm and focused. What's wrong? Anne explained about the custody petition, reading him the key passages. The silence on the other end stretched so long, she began to wonder if the call had dropped. Jin Wu, are you there? I'm here. His voice was different now, colder, more controlled. Where are you? At the studio. Stay there, don't go anywhere alone, and don't let Lily out of your sight when you pick her up from school. I'm handling this. How? Jin Wu, he's filed in Orange County Family Court. The hearing is scheduled for Friday. That's only 2 days away. Even if we hire the best lawyer in Orlando. Anne. The quiet authority in his voice stopped her mid-sentence. Trust me, Trevor Sullivan has made a very serious mistake. After he hung up, Anne tried to focus on work, but her mind kept spinning. How could Jin Wu sound so confident? Trevor had money, influence, and a legal system that often favored wealthy men over struggling single mothers. What could Jin Wu possibly do in 2 days? Her question was answered that evening when she arrived home to find Jin Wu in his study, speaking quietly in Korean to someone on the phone. She caught only fragments. Her Korean was still limited, but his tone was unmistakably that of someone giving orders. When he saw her in the doorway, he quickly ended the call. Any news? She asked. Trevor's lawyer is Marcus Webb from Webb. Harrison and Associates. Very expensive, very well connected. Jin Wu's expression was thoughtful. He's also very dependent on certain business relationships that could become problematic if the right pressure were applied. What kind of pressure? The kind that makes people reconsider their priorities. Jin Wu stood and moved to his desk, pulling out a thick folder. Trevor's petition relies heavily on the claim that I have criminal connections. He's hired a private investigator to dig into my background. Anne felt her stomach drop. What will they find? Nothing. Jin Wu's smile was sharp. I've been very careful about maintaining separation between my various business interests. On paper, I'm exactly what I appear to be, a successful construction company owner with an impeccable reputation. And off paper? Jin Wu was quiet for a moment, studying her face. Off paper, I'm someone who has spent years building a network of relationships that span from legitimate business to less legitimate enterprises. Someone who understands that real power isn't about making noise or throwing money around. It's about knowing exactly which strings to pull to make things happen. Anne sank into the chair across from his desk. Jin Wu, are you telling me you're... I'm telling you that Trevor Sullivan is about to learn that there are consequences for threatening my family. Jin Wu's voice was calm, matter-of-fact, and that those consequences will be swift, decisive, and completely untraceable to me. As if summoned by their conversation, Jin Wu's phone buzzed with a text. He glanced at it and smiled. expression that was somehow more unsettling than any frown. "What is it?" Trevor's private investigator just withdrew from the case. "Apparently, he's decided to take an extended vacation in another state." Anne stared at him. "How do you know that?" "I make it my business to know things that affect my family's safety." Jin Wu closed the folder and locked it in his desk drawer. "Trevor's lawyer will be receiving some interesting information tomorrow morning. Information about Trevor's own business practices that might make him reconsider taking this case to court." "What kind of information?" "The kind that reveals Trevor isn't quite the upstanding citizen he pretends to be." Jin Wu moved around the desk to sit beside her. "And I need you to understand something. The man you married, the man who loves you and Lily, that's completely real. But I also have resources and capabilities that I've kept separate from our life together. Not because I don't trust you, but because I wanted to protect you from having to know about them. And now? Now Trevor has forced my hand." Jin Wu took her hands in his touch warm and steady. "I won't let him take Lily from you. I won't let him hurt either of you, whatever it takes. However far I have to go, he will not win." The absolute certainty in his voice should have frightened her. Instead, Anne felt a wave of relief so powerful it left her dizzy. For 2 years, she'd faced Trevor's threats alone, always looking over her shoulder, always waiting for the next attack. But now... "What happens next?" she asked. "Next, Trevor learns that he's not the most dangerous man in Orlando." Jin Wu's smile was soft when he looked at her, but his eyes held a promise that was anything but gentle. "And that some mistakes can't be undone." The call came at 3 a.m., jarring Anne from restless sleep. Jin Wu answered before the second ring, his voice instantly alert despite the hour. "What is it?" he said in Korean, then switched to English. "When? How many?" "No, maintain distance. I'll handle this personally." Anne sat up, her heart pounding. "What's wrong?" Jin Wu was already getting dressed, his movements quick and efficient. "Trevor's escalated beyond legal threats. He's hired private security, ex-military contractors, to conduct surveillance on our house and your studio." "Surveillance for what?" "Officially, to gather evidence of my criminal activities for the custody hearing." Jin Wu's expression was grim as he pulled on a dark jacket. "Unofficially. To intimidate you, to make you feel unsafe in your own home." Anne felt ice in her veins. "What about Lily?" "She's safe. I have people watching the house." Jin Wu paused at her expression. "People you haven't seen, but they're there. They've been there since our wedding. You've had us under protection this whole time?" "Discreet protection. The kind that ensures your safety without disrupting your normal life." Jin Wu sat on the edge of the bed, his voice gentle. "And there are things about my business, my real business, that make certain precautions necessary. I never wanted you to have to think about them, but Trevor's actions have made that impossible." Anne's mind raced. "The men in suits at the gala, the way people defer to you in business meetings, the fact that you always seem to know things before they happen." She looked at him with new understanding. "You're not just successful, you're powerful in ways that have nothing to do with construction." "Yes." The simple admission hung between them. Anne studied her husband's face, seeing him clearly for perhaps the first time. The quiet confidence, the way he commanded respect without effort, the resources that seemed limitless. It all made sense now. "What exactly are you, Jin Wu?" "I'm someone who built an organization that operates in the spaces between legal and illegal. Someone who solves problems that can't be solved through conventional means." His voice was steady, honest. "Someone who has spent years becoming invisible to law enforcement while building a network that spans from legitimate business to activities that aren't." "You're talking about organized crime." "I'm talking about power, real power, the kind that doesn't announce itself or leave fingerprints." Jin Wu reached for her hands. "The kind that can protect the people I love from men like Trevor Sullivan." Anne was quiet for a long moment, processing this revelation. She thought about the past 6 months, about the way Jin Wu had seamlessly stepped into their lives, about the security she'd felt without understanding its source. "Are you in danger?" Are we in danger because of what you do? I've spent years making sure that my legitimate life and my other activities never intersect. Until tonight, they never have. Jin Wu's expression hardened. But Trevor's hired contractors have been asking questions in places they shouldn't, making inquiries that could draw attention to connections I've kept carefully hidden. What does that mean? It means I have to choose between maintaining my cover and protecting my family. Jin Wu stood checking his phone as it buzzed with messages. And that's not really a choice at all. Anne felt a chill of fear, not of Jin Wu, but for him. What are you going to do? I'm going to end this, tonight, before Trevor's investigation goes any further. Jin Wu's voice was calm, but Anne could see the steel underneath. Before he puts you and Lily at risk by poking into things he doesn't understand. How? Jin Wu was quiet for a moment, and Anne realized he was deciding how much to tell her. Trevor's contractors are currently parked outside your studio. They think they're conducting covert surveillance, but they're actually walking into a trap. A trap? The kind that will send a very clear message about the consequences of threatening my family. Jin Wu leaned down to kiss her forehead. Stay here with Lily. Don't leave the house until I call you. Jin Wu, wait. Anne caught his hand. Whatever you're about to do, will there be consequences? Will this come back to hurt us? His smile was soft, but edged with something dangerous. The only consequences will be for Trevor, and they'll be delivered in a way that ensures he can never trace them back to me. After he left, Han found herself unable to return to sleep. She checked on Lily, who was sleeping peacefully, then stood at the living room window looking out at their quiet street. Everything looked normal, but now she wondered what she wasn't seeing. How many of Jin Wu's people were out there? How long had they been protecting her family without her knowledge? Her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Your husband thinks he's smart, but I know what he really is. Enjoy your last few days with Lily. Tian's hands shook as she forwarded the message to Jin Wu, then double-checked all the locks on the doors. She was reaching for the security system panel when her phone rang. Anne. Jin Wu's voice was calm. I got your message. Where are you? At home. I checked on Lily. She's still asleep. Jin Wu, how does Trevor know about your other activities? He doesn't. He's fishing, trying to scare you. There was a pause, and Anne heard muffled voices in the background. But his contractors have been asking the wrong questions to the wrong people. That ends now. What's happening? Where are you? Are solving the problem? Jin Wu's voice was matter-of-fact. Trevor's surveillance team just discovered that their equipment has malfunctioned, all of it, simultaneously. They're also receiving some interesting phone calls about federal investigations into unlicensed private security operations. Anne felt a mixture of relief and apprehension. Will that stop them? It will make them disappear, permanently. Men like that can't afford to be investigated by federal authorities. There was another pause. Anne. Trevor's about to learn that he's been playing a game he doesn't understand, with rules he's never encountered, against an opponent he never saw coming. And after tonight? After tonight, he'll understand that his only option is to withdraw the custody petition and disappear from our lives completely. Jin Wu's voice carried absolute certainty, because the alternative will be consequences he's not prepared to face. As Anne hung up, she realized that her life had just changed irrevocably. The man she'd married for love had revealed himself to be someone far more complex and dangerous than she'd ever imagined. But as she thought about Trevor's threats, about the fear she'd lived with for 2 years, she felt something she hadn't expected. Gratitude. For the first time since her divorce, she wasn't facing Trevor alone, and the man standing beside her had resources that Trevor couldn't even comprehend. The Orange County family courthouse was buzzing with unusual activity when Anne arrived Friday morning with her attorney, Sarah Chen. A family law specialist Jin Wu had somehow secured on less than 48 hours' notice. Anne had expected to feel nervous, but instead she felt strangely calm. Jin Wu had been quietly confident all week, and his certainty had become infectious. Mrs. Park, Sarah said as they walked through the courthouse corridors, I have to tell you, I've never seen anything like what happened yesterday. Trevor Sullivan's attorney called my office 3 times trying to negotiate a settlement. Apparently, Mr. Sullivan is now willing to maintain the current custody arrangement with no modifications. What changed his mind? Sarah's expression was puzzled. I'm not entirely sure. Marcus Webb mentioned something about new information that made his client reconsider the wisdom of proceeding with the case. He seemed rattled. They entered the courtroom to find Trevor already seated with his lawyer, but something was clearly wrong. Trevor looked haggard, his usually perfect appearance disheveled. Marcus Webb kept checking his phone with increasing agitation. "Your Honor," Webb said as soon as Judge Patricia Morrison took the bench, "my client would like to withdraw the petition for emergency custody and maintain the current arrangement." Judge Morrison looked surprised. "Mr. Webb, this is highly unusual. Your petition claimed urgent circumstances requiring immediate intervention." "Yes, Your Honor, but upon further reflection—" "Upon further investigation," Trevor interrupted, his voice strained, "we've determined that the current arrangement is adequate." Anne exchanged glances with Sarah. This wasn't the Trevor she knew, the man who never backed down from a fight, who would rather burn everything down than admit defeat. "Mr. Sullivan," Judge Morrison said sternly, "are you withdrawing your petition voluntarily without coercion?" Trevor's laugh was bitter. "Oh, it's voluntary. Your Honor, very voluntary. In that case, the petition is dismissed. The current custody arrangement remains in effect." Judge Morrison's gavel fell with finality. As they left the courtroom, Anne caught Trevor's arm. "What happened? What made you change your mind?" Trevor's eyes were hollow, defeated. "You want to know what happened, Anne? Your husband happened. Your husband and his. Friends? I don't understand. Don't you?" Trevor's voice was barely above a whisper. 3 days ago, I thought I was dealing with some successful businessman who got lucky marrying up. Then my private investigators disappeared. Then my lawyer started getting calls about federal tax audits. Then someone delivered a very detailed file about my business practices to my office. Practices that could land me in federal prison for the next 20 years. Anne felt her breath catch. Trevor. But that wasn't the message, Anne. The message came last night when 2 men in very expensive suits visited my home. They didn't threaten me. They didn't even raise their voices. They just explained things to me about how the world really works, about who your husband really is. Trevor's hands were shaking. "Do you have any idea what you've married into?" Before Anne could answer, she felt a familiar presence behind her. Jin Wu appeared at her side, his expression calm and professional. "Mr. Sullivan," he said politely, "I trust everything was resolved to everyone's satisfaction." Trevor's face went pale. Yes, it was." "Excellent." Jin Wu's smile was warm, friendly. "I'm glad we could avoid any unnecessary complications." "There won't be any complications," Trevor said quickly. "The custody arrangement stays as is. I won't be filing any more petitions. I won't be contacting Anne except for matters directly related to Lily's scheduled visits." "I'm very pleased to hear that." Jin Wu's tone was conversational, but Anne noticed how Trevor seemed to shrink under his gaze. "I trust you'll also be ending any surveillance or investigation activities?" "Already done. Completely done." "Wonderful." Jin Wu placed a protective hand on Anne's back. "Then I believe our business is concluded." As Trevor hurried away, Anne looked up at her husband. "What did you do?" "I had a conversation with him, a very honest conversation about the realities of his situation." "Jin Wu." "Anne." His voice was gentle but firm. "Trevor Sullivan will never threaten you or Lily again. He understands now that doing so would have consequences he's not prepared to face. That's all you need to know." They walked out of the courthouse into the bright Florida sunshine, and Anne felt as if she was seeing the world with new eyes. The man beside her, her husband, Lily's stepfather, the person she'd fallen in love with, was someone far more complex and powerful than she'd ever imagined. "So are you afraid of me now?" Jin Wu asked quietly as they reached his car. Anne considered the question seriously. Was she afraid? She thought about the past week, about the way Jin Wu had handled Trevor's threats with calm efficiency, about the resources he'd deployed, the problems he'd solved, the protection he'd provided. "No," she said finally, "I'm not afraid of you. I'm afraid of what it means that I need someone like you to protect my family." "You don't need someone like me, Anne. You're stronger than you know." Jin Wu opened her car door, his expression soft. "But you have someone like me anyway, and that means you'll never have to face threats like Trevor's alone again." As they drove home, Anne's phone buzzed with a text from Jasmine. "Girl, you need to see the news. Trevor Sullivan's company just got raided by the FBI. Something about tax evasion and money laundering. It's all over Orlando media." Anne showed the message to Jin Wu, who glanced at it without surprise. "Convenient timing," she said. "Very convenient," he agreed. "Almost like someone provided federal authorities with exactly the evidence they needed to build an airtight case." Someone. Jin Wu's smile was enigmatic. Someone who believes in justice. Someone who thinks men like Trevor should face consequences for their actions. Someone who happens to be married to the woman Trevor was threatening? Pure coincidence, I'm sure. Anne laughed despite everything. A real laugh, free and unburdened for the first time in years. "Jin Wu Park, what have I gotten myself into?" "A life where you're protected, valued, and loved," he said simply. "A life where men like Trevor Sullivan can't hurt you anymore." As they pulled into their driveway, Anne saw Lily's face appear in the living room window, breaking into a huge smile when she saw them. Her daughter, safe, secure, protected by a man who had chosen to love them both. "Whatever else you are," Anne said softly, "you're the best thing that ever happened to us." Jin Wu's expression was tender as he looked toward the house where Lily was waiting. The feeling is entirely mutual. Years later, the Orlando Children's Hospital Foundation Gala had become Anne's favorite event of the year, though for very different reasons than when she'd first attended as Jin Wu's wife. Now, as she stood at the podium in the Dr. Phillips Center, looking out at the sea of elegant faces, she felt only confidence and purpose. "When I started my design business 5 years ago," she said into the microphone, "I never imagined it would grow into something that could give back to our community in such a meaningful way. The Children's Art Therapy Center we're unveiling tonight represents not just a space for healing, but a testament to what's possible when we refuse to let others define our worth." The applause was warm, genuine. In the audience, she could see Jin Wu watching her with pride. Lily, now 11 and poised, sitting beside him in her first formal dress. Carmen Morales was there too, having become not just a friend, but the coordinator for Anne's charitable foundation. After the presentation, as guests mingled during cocktail hour, Mrs. Catherine Beaumont approached with a warm smile. "Anne, dear, that was beautiful. The therapy center is going to change so many young lives." "That's the hope," Anne replied, accepting a glass of champagne from a passing waiter. "Art saved me once. I want to make sure other children have that same opportunity." "Speaking of saving," Mrs. Beaumont said quietly, "I heard through the grapevine that Trevor Sullivan was finally sentenced. 25 years, wasn't it?" Anne nodded. The federal case against Trevor had been thorough, devastating, and completely airtight. Tax evasion, money laundering, fraud. The evidence had been overwhelming. "He'll be eligible for parole in 15 years. "Well," Mrs. Beaumont said with satisfaction, "some people get exactly what they deserve." As the evening wound down, Anne found herself on the center's terrace, looking out at the Orlando skyline. The city lights twinkled like stars, and she could hear the distant sound of traffic, of life continuing in all its messy, beautiful complexity. "Penny for your thoughts?" Jin Wu appeared beside her, offering her his jacket against the evening breeze. "Just thinking about how different everything is now." Anne slipped into the jacket, breathing in the familiar scent of his cologne. 5 years ago, I was terrified of my own shadow. Tonight, I stood in front of 300 people and felt powerful. You were always powerful. You just needed to remember it. With a little help from my husband's unique skill set, Jin Wu's laugh was soft. My skill set had nothing to do with your strength, Anne. It just removed the obstacles that were preventing you from showing it. They stood in comfortable silence, watching the city below. Anne thought about the life they'd built together, her thriving business, Lily's happiness and security, the family they'd created from the ashes of their individual traumas. "Do you ever regret it?" she asked, "revealing so much of yourself to protect us? The risk you took?" "Never." Jin Wu's answer was immediate, certain. Everything I built, every connection I made, every resource I accumulated, it was all meaningless until I had something worth protecting. And now? Now I have everything that matters. He turned to face her, his expression tender in the moonlight. A wife who amazes me every day. A daughter who calls me dad and means it. A life that's real in ways I never thought possible. From inside the center, they could hear Lily's laughter as she charmed the remaining guests with stories about her latest art project. The sound made them both smile. "She's going to be formidable when she grows up," Jin Wu observed. "She already is. She gets that from both sides of her family now." Lucky girl. Anne leaned into her husband's embrace, feeling the solid strength of him, the security that had become as natural as breathing. Somewhere in the city below, life continued in all its chaos and complexity. But here, in this moment, everything was exactly as it should be. "I love you, Jin Wu Park," she said softly. "I love you too, Anne Washington Park. Both of you, always." The Orlando skyline glittered before them, full of promise and possibility. And Anne knew that whatever challenges the future might bring, they would face them together, with love, with strength, and with the unshakable knowledge that some bonds are worth any risk, any sacrifice, any price.